Any other comments? Well, if not, we'll go straight to the report from the Chief of Police.
Thank you, and good morning, Commissioners. First, in general comments, I wanted to express the sorrow and the empathy of the Los Angeles Police Department for the people of Santa Monica College, and the men and women of the Santa Monica Police Department. The horrific incidents of the past week, I know, have left a significant scar on them. It also highlights the importance of the work that's being done in this state towards the continuing of the assault weapon ban and the further modification of the type of rifles that are available within the state. Also, the limits placed on 30-round magazines and the purchases of ammunition. None of those things in and of themselves are an absolute stoppage to this kind of carnage, but every one of them makes it that much more difficult. I think it also highlights the importance of the work that the Los Angeles Police Department and the Attorney General of the state of California are doing jointly towards prohibited possessors, particularly those that suffer from mental health issues and are therefore prohibited from possessing a firearm. Again, I don't have any specifics as to this individual, but certainly the work that we do to keep firearms out of the hands of folks that shouldn't have them makes this that much more difficult to happen in the city of Los Angeles. With that, I'll move forward to my general report on crime. We continue to be down as compared to 2011 and actually as compared to 2012. Also, in every category in the city of Los Angeles, homicides are down 17%, rapes are down 30%, robberies are down 12.6%, aggravated assaults are down 9.1%. It's a total violent crime reduction of just under 12% so far year to date, and of course we're closing in on the halfway mark. Property crime, we're doing well, not quite as well as in violent crime. Burglaries are down 4%, vehicle thefts are down 7.8%, thefts from vehicle are down 4.5%, and personal thefts, general type thefts, are down 7.3%. That's a total property crime reduction of just under 6%. Gives us a total Part 1 crime reduction of right at 7%. Shootings are down also throughout the city. If you look at it in the city's geographies, every bureau is down in Part 1 crime. And at this particular time, West Bureau is leading with 11.2% reduction. Personnel statistics. We have 9,979 sworn personnel on payroll. We're going to be starting a new class this next week. That will put us over the 10,000 mark. Reserve officers, we have 269 level 1s, 21 level 2s, 128 level 3s, 371 specialist volunteers, 34 chaplains. Civilian personnel, we have 2,830 civilian personnel assigned and 517 vacancies. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, and I'm sure each member of the Board of Commissioners echoes your remarks about the terrible tragedy in Santa Monica and the extraordinarily sad stories of the victims, and also all of the efforts that you and the Attorney General and so many in our communities are making to reduce gun violence, and specifically our gun buyback program here at the LAPD. The report of the Executive Director.
Morning, Madam President, members of the Commission. Just one brief informational item. As you know, the Commission Investigation Division has been working for a number of years on the implementation of a valet ordinance as to regulating valet operations and valet operators and attendants within the city. That ordinance will go to Public Safety Committee for its final review on Friday, then hopefully to Council next week. And Commission Investigation Division has a process in place to do an education outreach program to all the current valet operators within the city. We've had a number of meetings with parking lot operators already and with other individuals in the downtown business community, the Hollywood area entertainment community, to educate them about the piece. So over the next several months, we'll be doing an expansive education program both through the media and Commission Investigation Division personnel actually going out in the evening hours and contacting valet operators so they're aware of the requirement to be permitted. So hopefully in the next 90 days we will get people permitted, and then after a 90-day period we will begin enforcement within the community. So it's a big effort by Commission Investigation Division of the City at whole. And that concludes my report.
No, the whole group has done an extraordinary job in putting this together, and I think probably the job is not completed, but I really congratulate everyone in the staff who worked so hard on making this happen. The report of the Inspector General.
Thank you, Madam President. Commissioners, just briefly want to let the Commission know that my staff and I will be in Venice this evening between 6:30 and 9:30 to do a community meeting with various members and stakeholders from the community on some of the use of force issues and some of the other community-related issues that have been brought to my attention. We'll be there, and I'll report back to you separately on the results of that meeting.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Number 5 is our information filed items, noise variance permits on file as submitted for the period ending June 7th, 2013. More details are in the full agenda, as also the special event permits on file for the period ending June 7th, 2013. Are there any presentations today?
Yes, ma'am. We have 3. We can start with Operation South Bureau Deputy Chief Bob Green, who will introduce the individual who is receiving the presentation. Then after that, have the commissioners have their comments and do the recognition.
Welcome, Deputy Chief.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners, Chief. I'd like to introduce and have step up Adrienne Mack and Officer Bridget Peterson from South Traffic.
Good morning.
Right in here is fine. It is rare that we find community members that are just passionate about helping the police department. And Adrienne has had a passion for babies. She's a mother, a professional, and she donates tremendous time, and she's been doing it for over 3 years in not only Southborough, but now throughout the city. She founded Providing for Kids Foundation, and she started with traffic safety programs for new moms going to the hospital to get a car seat and get training as to how to operate that car seat. And ultimately, she went out and got donations and beats the bushes to get car seats to present to these moms when they're done their training. She's been extremely successful in conjunction with Bridget and expanded out throughout South Bureau to now they've got a trailer, and they're going to start taking that from 77th out into the community to do more and more of the training. But she approached me in 2010 because she saw an article or a news story on cops bringing an infant to the station. And she started questioning, what do we do when we get those babies to the station? Do we have diapers? Do we have wipes? Do those cops have any idea what to do with that baby? And in some cases, those young cops have no idea. And so ultimately, she started with a diaper bag program to where she's gone out and gotten donations and got diaper bags for each one of the commands in South Bureau, started West Bureau and Central Bureau, and now we're moving to Valley Bureau. And not only does she make sure that those commands all have diaper bags that are outfitted in their kit rooms, but she checks on those monthly to make sure the supplies are maintained and that they're fresh. They've got blankets. And so she's done a tremendous job expanding that program throughout the city. And then she identified we had an issue with our soft rooms. You know, those rooms that we take kids when we bring them to the stations and they have to spend time when we're waiting for Department of Children and Family Services. And so she is now taken upon herself to do makeovers to the soft rooms in the different commands. And she's bringing in artists to do murals in them, TVs, kids' games, furniture, the whole shot across the board. And so for going on 4 years now, she's been extraordinarily passionate. And we want to make sure that she had an opportunity to stand in front of the commission and the community and be recognized for all the great things that she has done, and that Bridget had that same opportunity for everything that she's done in South Traffic. So with that, I'd like Adrian just to have a minute for comments. Adrian?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm honored to be here. First, I would be remiss if I did not give an amazing thank you to Deputy Chief for accepting all of my phone calls and all of my emails when I identify another layer needs to be born in the program. So thank you so much for that. Questions?
No, but we would very much like to give our deepest appreciation and gratitude for your innovation, for your devotion, and for all of those emails and calls. It's made a real difference, and we wanted to recognize that. And I think we get to even take a picture and deliver a commendation and a certificate of recognition to you. We'll be coming down there.
And I might say it's great to have someone reflecting so favorably upon the MAC name. That better than I do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very nice. Very nice.
And I don't need to ask a question about who the next two honorees are. The Commission wishes to recognize Carlos de la Guerra, who is our Assistant City Attorney, and Julie Raffish, Deputy City Attorney 4. Everyone, I think, in this room knows them and knows of their commitments and their responsibilities. We're lucky enough to be joined also by the City Attorney and by Bill Carter, the Chief Deputy. Hello there. How are you?
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Good morning, Chief, Inspector General. I'm proud of the important role that our office has spent over the last few years in this unfortunate chapter. As most of you know, my Chief Deputy, Bill Carter, was one of the Rampart prosecutors. And so this day and this celebration is overly important to this office and our role in it, and the role that Carlos and Julie have spent. They need to be congratulated and thanked for providing the great advice along the way to get us to the position that we are. The office worked closely with the U.S. Department of Justice, the Los Angeles Police Commission, the Inspector General, the Chief, and the community to make this happen. And things like this don't just happen. This is a first. And as you see that there are other cities in the nation now that are being called out, and Los Angeles is being cited as the example. And it's because of the efforts of everyone mentioned, including Carlos and Julie. So thank you for their efforts. The protocols and policies put in place will make this, our police department, a much more ethical, a much more professional, and a much more constitutional operation. And so I want to thank Carlos and Julie, if they'll join me up here so I can have a couple of certificates from the office.
All right, that seems fine, and then we will go to the Commission presentation.
Let me read you Come on, pal. Congratulations. Let me read you the inscription. It says, "It's hereby awarded to this certificate of appreciation for extraordinary achievements and contributions that have been of great value to our community and to the City of Los Angeles in the United States of America versus the City of Los Angeles et al. your work with the U.S. Department of Justice, the Los Angeles Police Commission, the Inspector General, the Los Angeles Police Department to create and implement the necessary policies and protocols will ensure that our police department continues to operate in keeping with the highest ethical, professional, and constitutional standards. So on behalf of the Office of the Los Angeles City Attorney and the entire city of Los Angeles, Carlos, congratulations. Job well done. The office, the City of LA, congratulations on a job well done. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank
Carlos,
you.
why don't you just stay
Carlos and Julie, why don't you maybe just have them... Yes, yeah. Well, as all of you have heard, they have both, Carlos and Julie, over an extraordinarily long period of time, served this city and served the police commission with intelligence, with diligence, often with imagination and great research, and in particularly through the consent decree. Both the champions and critics of this great department recognize that it is a better department because of that consent decree. And your ability to act as negotiators, your ability to act as researchers, your ability to act and give us your very best judgment help the whole team to make this thing happen. You were an integral part of the process from the very beginning. You developed a positive and a trustworthy relationship with our adversaries at that time, the Department of Justice, in a way that the government could work together and come to a good conclusion. You're both true professionals with a respect for justice and fairness, and we're very proud to have you as our lawyers. And for that, we would like to present you with our commission scrolls and take a picture as well.
Thank you.
Would you like to make a comment, Carlos? I've already heard that Julie does not wish to.
Let me just say, I've been here for a long time, and I know that the consent decree has been viewed as the catalyst for change. But, the department has changed in ways that go way beyond the scope of the consent decree, and that's a credit to the men and women of the department and its leadership. The best practices, other changes that have occurred. For example, I was an explorer many, many years ago, and the fact that it's no longer the Explorer program because of the exclusionary practices, it's now the cadet program. That wasn't in the consent decree. I mean, there are things beyond that the department does every day, and I've been a witness to that, having been around as long as I have. So thank you for your leadership, and thank you for the certificate that they're going to give us.
And thank you so very much. Here we come. Sure, do you want a picture? Yeah, let's do one at a time for the picture. One at a time. Just do one. Oh, no, there is that. This is what you do over here. Like an angel.
Put him in the middle.
Makes me want to go. We have 4 and 8.
Oh, really?
4 cars.
Oh, that's it, just 4. Okay.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
thanks very much for the leadership of the City Attorney's Office joining us. I think it makes it a more special day for the people in the office.
She wouldn't have done it without him.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
With that, we turn to our consent agenda items. Consent agenda A through I.
I move approval of the consent agenda items A through I.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Now, our regular agenda is a little more demanding than some today. I think I know we will be hearing from the Inspector General on the non-categorical use of force investigations. I know we will also be hearing from the department on its analysis of traffic collisions over the last 5 years. We will have the quarterly report from the department's risk manager. That's C. We have, I don't think we have I.
F.
Is F. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I read the wrong place. We have F, which is the Bureau Gang Enforcement audit. And with that, I will accept a motion.
Madam President, move approval of agenda items 8D and E.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Approved. I think we will go first to A, which is the Inspector General's report on the review of non-categorical use of force investigations.
Thank you, Madam President. Commissioners, I'm going to just wait a brief moment until my staff is settled in. At the table before you will be, from my office, Django Sibley, who's the head of our use of force section, Kevin Rogan, who's the Assistant Inspector General in charge of our complaint section, and who would have been here was Gary McCaskill, who retired recently, and he was the head of my audit section. And Commissioners, it also appears that Captain Scott Sargent for the department is here as well. To give the Commissioners a little background on why we decided to do this report, the non-categorical process as it exists right now was implemented approximately a decade ago and had not been looked at except from audits from a qualitative perspective. Although my office has looked at it and audited, and I know the department has done it as well, there are limitations to the audits. Audits will give you some of the performance features and will tell you some of the statistics and the general mechanics of the process, but it lacks the ability to kind of look past that into some of the qualitative or in the finer points of how the system is actually operating. And what we decided that it was necessary to pool the resources of my office and have the non-categorical process examined from all three sections and try to see how it's performing, if it's actually performing as designed, and if there's anything that we can do to improve the process from an investigatory standpoint or from a transparency standpoint. And so this report is our best effort in trying to accomplish that. What you'll see, Commissioners, is that we set out to examine the process from multiple angles, and we'll present those conclusions pretty squarely in the report. But I think the most telling part of the report is the level of interaction between the department and my staff. We went through all the recommendations that we had, and the department was more than willing to listen to us and agree to make these changes. And I think that this process works on a whole quite well, but as in any large process, there's room for improvement. And we've identified some of those issues, as well as the department on their own identifying some. And I think this is a big push forward in those in that direction. And those recommendations are specifically listed on the last 3 pages of the report. And pending any questions you might have, my staff and I are prepared to answer that.
Well, it certainly has been an extraordinary effort on behalf of all of the staff, and we certainly miss having Inspector General staff McCaskill here as well, because I know he spent a great deal of time on this, and I think it's witness how important it is also the way it's described of what are non-categorical use of force investigations. Before we really start with any detailed questions, Inspector General, can you explain to us just what exactly the non-categorical use of force items are, and something more about the volume of them.
Sure. We use the term categoricals and non-categoricals to talk about the reportable uses of force from the department, and those are, as you've, Madam President, identified, terms of art. And categorical uses of forces are discharge of firearms or lethal use of force, in custody deaths, hospitalizations resulting from use of force from the police. And non-categoricals are essentially all other reportable uses of force that don't meet that one threshold. And just to put this in a perspective, the department averages around 160,000 arrests per year, and approximately 1% of those arrests, or an average of about 1,757 cases, involves use of force. Of that 1,700 cases, approximately 95% of those cases are non-cats. They would be in that level that don't rise to the level of a categorical. So when we're talking in this report about the non-categorical investigative process, we're talking about that 1% of use of force of the department from all the arrests that occur in a year. We're talking about 95% of that 1%, if I can not convolute things at all. But it's the bulk, the overwhelming bulk of the use of force, and the lesser uses of force by the department. And that's what this report tries to uncover, is look at that process and examine whether it's hitting on all cylinders or if there's things that we can do to improve that process.
Just some questions of more specifics at the moment?
Well, not so much questions, but a couple of comments. First of all, I thought this was an outstanding report. And this is really the way the system should be working. Non-cats, they're the lesser uses of force. They don't get the same level of scrutiny. But I think overall they present areas of risk to the department. In terms of making sure that the department is adhering to policies, the department's adequately investigating these to reduce chances for liabilities. I think these are areas that can slide under the radar if they're not thoroughly looked at. And so this report, I think, does a really good job of doing an in-depth analysis of that process, working with the department and having the department then respond and implementing many of the recommendations. So I think the Inspector General's office really did an outstanding job, and I commend the department as well for its response to the recommendations. The one thing I would like to see is, actually there are two things. One, I think this has to be done on a regular basis, perhaps an annual basis, because non-cats can slide under the radar and can, as I said, pose risk to the department. And then the second thing I'd like to see is I'd like to see either 90 days or 6 months follow-up to this report, just in terms of the recommendations that were made, the department's response with respect to the implementation of those recommendations, and where we are in the implementation of those recommendations. So I don't have any specific questions. I think this really was an outstanding piece of work by both the IG and by the department.
I would certainly echo Commissioner Druin's comments. I think overall it's a very comprehensive and thorough and highly professional report. And as Commissioner Druin indicated, I particularly appreciate the collaboration between the Inspector General's office on the one hand and the department on the other hand in response to the areas that were pointed out that needed to be improved upon. I think that's an example of the way the oversight process should work from both perspectives. Again, I don't have questions, but maybe Inspector General or Assistant Chief MacArthur may want to just talk a little bit about the recommendations. Highlight the recommendations and sort of where we are at this point. And I certainly agree with Commissioner Druin that maybe we'll need to have a follow-up in a reasonable period of time. I mean, I'm thinking of this more for the public's benefit as well as our benefit.
Right. And It may be that we'd want to have a few more questions and that make it a little easier for you to know exactly what we're asking you to respond to. If it's,
you have some. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Didn't
fine.
mean to preempt you.
Either way is fine. I share the comments of my fellow commissioners thanking the department and the Inspector General for the report, which I think is comprehensive. Its recommendations are constructive and strike me as practical, and clearly a great example of the department and the Inspector General working together. Also, commending the department on the Inspector General's overall conclusion that there's a high level of compliance, which is obviously significant and important. Following up a little bit on Commissioner Julian's comment, the non-categorical uses of force are less serious by definition, but as the Inspector General said, far more common, meaning that to the extent a member of the public is like to experience a use of force in the interaction with the department, it's much more likely for it to be a non-categorical rather than categorical, which is in part why this is as important as it is. And as good as the results are in the overall conclusion, there are a few things in the report that lead to recommendations, and I'd like to ask about a couple of those just to make sure we understand them well. There are a couple general areas just to help you sort of follow how I'm thinking about this. One is the question about documentation of the individual accounts of the involved officers or the witnessing officers. As I understand the current system, there's essentially a composite report, and the Inspector General is recommending a different approach to that, in part to allow reviewers to determine if the use of force is objectively reasonable, if it complies with the department policy, and along with that, additional training for the watch commanders for this process. And so those generally are the issues I'd like to hear more about. Along those lines, one of the recommendations is that each officer write an individual statement about the use of force. And I guess I'd like the Inspector General or the department or both just to explain how the process is working now, what you're seeing, and how, with the recommendation, things will be different.
Sure. Commissioner, the way it generally works is whether you have one or multiple officers that are involved in a non-CAT, that lesser use of force, that force is generally reported in an arrest report, and one officer will write that and summarize the actions that occurred, whether, what justified the force, what happened in the overall incident. And what we have asked the department, and the department has agreed to, is to try to create a scenario where we can somehow figure out the layers. If there are 5 or 10 people involved, what are they seeing? What is their perspective as far as the use of force? And trying to figure out a way that we can capture that. So as the commissioners will know, you'll have some people that'll be watching, some people that'll be in different perspectives. And the more information that we generally get, it generally will help our analysis of whether it supports the officers, and also just to give the reviewers in that chain a better assessment tool. They'll be able to look and see if there's something training-wise that needs to be done, or if there really is no issue there. But we thought that in order to meet that standard, the objectively reasonable standard, that we need individual accounts in order to assess that. So that would be, to re-hit the point, if there are 15 people that either witnessed or participated, we'd have 15 individual accounts.
I can go a little bit deeper for you if you'd like.
Yes, please.
For the last about year and a half, we've been in conversation with Django, who is our representative, as you know, on use of force, regarding specifically how could we document individuals' accounts during the non-CAT. And we realized that those individual statements would also help the supervisors, not just the frontline supervisors, but also the watch commander, and then, of course, the commanding officer as it goes through the chain for final review. So that discussion had been ongoing, and the report just helped to codify that this is now something that we're going to be able to report back to you on. And we're very, very close, we believe, to having a statement sheet, so that each individual officer, from their vantage point, their perspective, will just do a very brief what their perspective was and what they did. And that, we think that that's really important. It also will help us when we go forward in doing our training, because as you can see, I feel like I always stand up in front of you. Many of these recommendations fall under training. And that is another area that we were talking about moving forward in training probably about 6 months ago. But as the IG's office pointed out, there are several conflicting manual sections that we need to resolve. So they've helped really us to hone in on basically our prioritization on what we need to move forward on and how to move forward and in what order. So we do believe that we're going to be able to come to an agreement very quickly on the statement sheets, and we think that's going to greatly enhance future reviews of our non-CATs for both ourselves, auditors, and the Inspector General as well.
In effect, you're going to be using a form, more or less?
Yeah, we're going to be creating a form, so that we, like I said, if there was 10 people, that's unusual, but occasionally that happens. There will be 10 people involved in the use of force. Each of the individual officers can then document what happened. It'll also help them when they go to court. They'll have their own statement.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and I understand that the Inspector General is helping in the drafting of that form, so that, in part, to help with the auditing process as well, the consistency and figuring out the different perspectives, and that seems like absolutely moving in the right direction to me. I guess one of the questions I have, this is more for the Inspector General, I think. In the report, you say that you are not able to review or evaluate the substantive interviews in the Level 2 cases. And so I guess I'd like to understand that better. What percentage of cases are Level 2s? What you mean when you say you're not able to audit them, and whether that isn't a problem that really does need to be fixed.
And also, for help me as well, how is that determination, and I don't know if that's from the department or from you, the determination of Level 1 and Level 2, and how it moves from one to another?
Sure. The cutoff generally for Level 1 and Level 2 is if there is a conflict, a material conflict, that'll raise a non-CAT to a Level 1. If there is a use of force requiring a level of treatment, a serious use of force requiring a level of medical treatment, that'll raise it up to a Level 1. And if there's a complaint initiated, that can also raise it to a Level 1. And the importance of a Level 1 is, if you get to a Level 1 non-CAT, there's a lot of documentation that occurs. The witnesses, non-department witnesses, will be audio taped. The suspect will be audio taped if they choose to make a statement. They may invoke and decide not to make a statement. And the process is just generally much more robust. If you do not meet that cutoff, then you get to the Level 2 standard, and in that Level 2 standard there will not be the audio taping and some of the documentation necessary for the Level 1. And that was designed 10 years ago as the cutoff, that they were going to prioritize certain uses of force as having a kind of a heightened review, and that the others would get this lesser review. The point that I was making from our office's perspective is that in doing a qualitative assessment of this, on the Level 2s, because there is no audio taping and the documentation is much less, it's very hard for us to look past that initial report to determine the quality of the report. We're kind of left with what we have with the report. So it's hard for me, like in many of the Level 1s, to go to the audio tape and go to everything else and examine if the quality of the investigation was good or not. And that's not to say that they're not good. I just don't have the ability to do that. And that was the distinction that I had brought up and tried to bring to the bring to the attention of the commissioners. The other question that you asked specifically was what percentage are level 2s, and I had thrown out a bunch of stats before, 1% and everything, that you have approximately 1,700 non-cats a year. Of those 1,700 uses of force, 95% of them will be non-cats. So 95 of the 1,700 will be non-cats. Of all the non-cats, 90% of them, approximately 90% of them, will be level 2s.
And so, if I understand, right, so for that big group, that largest group is what we're talking about, that your ability to audit is limited. And would it be your recommendation, or would it just be impractical for there to be audio taping of those interviews? Or would that be a solution to the problem?
I haven't examined all the resources issues, and nor am I in a position to do that. But generally, because I'm an oversight entity, I would love to be able to examine any item. Now, there's a lot of things that go into that calculus, a lot of cost-benefit analysis, there's a lot of resource issues. But as a oversight entity, I'm generally, whether it's in this issue and any other issue, going to want to be able to look from time to time and test certain things to make sure that they're functioning at an appropriate level and that there's nothing that's actually slipping through the cracks or training opportunities that are missed.
Are you able to determine, do you think that the department is accurately categorizing these as level 1s versus level 2? I mean, ultimately, the department's got to make that determination that this is a level 1, therefore it gets the heightened scrutiny. And is that determination, do you think, being made accurately by the department?
From what we see, generally, yes. But without being able to look at the level 2s in a more qualitative manner, I would have to qualify that statement. But generally, yes, from what we see in the process that we're looking at, the system as designed, and this was designed approximately 10 years ago with many players from the community and from DOJ and from the commission and the department. When they put the system together, that was the design feature of that, was to try to prioritize and find the ones that needed the most attention. But to go specifically to your question of the categorization, what do I see? From what I have, I see it's generally done well. I can't give an assessment on what I'm not able to look at. Right. So I can't tell you one way or another.
That to me is the critical question, because, I mean, there ultimately is a resource issue. And you want to devote your resources where you have an allegation of misconduct, you have a medical injury, or you have an elevated level of force. And so I think it is an appropriate allocation of resources to devote more resources to those that have the greatest potential of risk and the most serious uses of force. And so therefore the critical issue is the department making that determination correctly? Because if it is, then it seems to me you have this category of level 2s in which you have no injury, no significant injury, not a serious use of force, and you don't have a complaint of allegation of misconduct. And without those three categories, any of those things being present, it seems to me it makes some sense in terms of determining your resources that you're not going to investigate those to the extent that you're going to do the level 1s. And so that to me is the critical question. What you see says they seem to be doing it correctly. Is there something else that the department, additional information that the department could provide you that would give you a higher level of confidence that they're making that determination correctly?
I knew it would become time to talk to the department.
Yes. It looks like the chief may want to make a point. But the point that we do believe will help in their future assessments, not just the department, but also the Inspector General, is those statement sheets. Because that will give them the ability to see if there are any material conflicts that weren't recognized by a supervisor. And we think that'll be a good step forward. The department risk manager actually that was one of the points that she, in her report that is coming up, that was one of the things that she was going to be looking at specifically. And this report is a great stepping stone for us to then dig into exactly what your concern is. But that's where we believe we will be able to get a better assessment of those issues. Chief?
Is there any reason that the department can't record all of the...
When we did the assessment, and nothing has changed in terms of the total number of we're always between 1,500 and 1,700 a year for the last 10 years in the non-categorical department. And when you look at the average, it would be approximately 5 to 6 hours per incident of tape recording, which does make it extremely resource intensive, which is why at the time the Inspector General, the Chief of Police at the time, and the commissioners and everybody who worked on the project, we looked at what are the biggest risks, and the ones that are in the level 1 were considered the biggest risk. But risk manager wants to look at that and see if there's anything else that needs to be added.
And just to put it in perspective, the commission must remember that the people doing these investigations are first-line supervision, and if they're out of the field, then they're not supervising directly. And I think that you don't want to put the process ahead of the result, and so and that's what the commission and the monitor and the department looked at the first time around. We're trying to make these thorough, but with a respect for time, realizing that that's our finite resource is the time of our supervisor.
I guess I certainly share the concerns about the resources and making sure things are working, not having the ability to audit get in the way of the functioning. I am a little bit stuck because if the key to whether it's a level 1 or level 2 has to do with material inconsistency, and there is no record of the interview where the inconsistency would appear, seems to me the Inspector General is saying that is something that they are simply unable to verify. And I guess I appreciate the form is going to help with that because to some extent we're going to see more if there are inconsistencies there, although the forms are from the officers and as witnesses and participants, if I have this right. And the recording would also be of some of the interviews of witnesses. And so I guess my suggestion, at least, would be for the Inspector General, certainly in the initial report back to us that Commissioner Julian has asked about, to help us understand that issue as this process starts to move forward. Are those forms actually helping to solve that problem and create the opportunity for you to audit at a level that you're comfortable with or not? And if not, is there some step in between recording 100% and recording 0 for the level 2s that would allow us some more satisfaction level with the auditing without having a significant effect on the actual practice? And I don't know the answer to that, but I would suggest you consider that.
It seems to me that let's see how effective the form is going to be.
Right, and that's what I'm
and
asking.
It seems to me that the follow-up report, I think it'll be important for the Inspector General, for the follow-up report to assess the effectiveness of the form after there's been an opportunity for it to be implemented for a reasonable period of time. And then if not, to your point, maybe look at the feasibility of some other option. And I don't mean to have you completed. I wanted to make another observation on a different subject.
And I know, Commissioner, was this on the Bernardino? Was this on the same subject?
It relates to what we're talking about now, but I'll wait for Commissioner Mack, please.
Okay.
No, I just one point of clarification, particularly for the public's benefit. And one of the reasons why this report is so important and so valuable in terms of focusing on the non-categorical use of force is because this commission does not routinely have the non-categorical use of forces brought to our attention on the one hand. On the other hand, each week following our open session and closed session, categorical use of forces involving either categorical use of force and also involve shootings which require hospitalization, etc. We do have a very careful, in-depth review of those incidents, both from the department's perspective, from the chief and use of force board on the one hand, Inspector General on the other, and then we make a judgment as to whether or not the actions of individual officers were in policy or out of policy as it relates to the categories of force. So several of my colleagues have already made the comments about this has the potential of falling between the cracks. I mean, this is one of the reasons I would just point out of the value and the importance of this particular report and this particular process and discussion that's taking place right now.
Commissioner Bernardino?
Mr. Inspector General, I thought it was an excellent report. The question I had, though, is as it is evolved and what Chief MacArthur just said, we have to make decisions on resources, time, money, everything. It would help me to figure out what the best priority is. Do we have any indication of how often these categorical uses of forces become lawsuits against the department? And within that, how many Category 1s become or Category 2s become? Because I think that would help the cost-benefit analysis we may have to do.
I don't have that information. I can get that information to the best that is available and present it to you.
So perhaps in the next report it might be included. Thank you.
And I just, if it's okay, I just have two more questions for the department. Chief MacArthur, I think it would be helpful for all of us and for the public if you'd talk a little bit about the training that you're planning, what you expect it to look like, who you think will be trained, when it's likely to start.
Well, first, what we're waiting before we kick it off will be two things. Summer, because we try not to do much training during the summer for the obvious reasons of deployment issues. And two, to get the form completed and through the process and approved by the chief, which we do believe we'll be able to do that by the end of summer. I believe the commissioners are aware that we do our leadership enhancement and development training 3 times a year for our command staff. And we have, this year in 2013, we implemented twice a year for lieutenants, all lieutenants, whether they're watch commanders or otherwise. So this is scheduled on the docket for both the fall session of leads for command staff, captains and above, as well as the fall session for leads for lieutenants and above, or lieutenants and detective 3s we're including also. So our goal, we are going to address all of the issues in the recommendations. In fact, I had bulleted them out into one category, and there's about actually 15 points that are solid points out of this report that will be part of the training. And our focus will, our hope also is that we will have the modifications to the manual where the conflicts in the manual existed resolved by that point too. And Captain Zach is working with us in PRD to get those policies because it's very important that they all come together. And that will help us also in terms of moving forward with the having consistency in the reviewing process. People will all be looking at the same policies, have been all trained on the same issues, and we think that's going to make a big help in that regard. The other piece that we're going to be doing is implementing the changes, the modifications in the supervisor school for all sergeants and detective 2s when they go to their basic school. And then I think many of you are aware we've moved forward with our 3-day supervisor in-service course, which every 3 to 4 years, all supervisors, sergeants, and detectives will be going to this updated class. And it's a 3-day class that incorporates leadership, use of force, specifically categorical and non-categorical. So this will just flow right into that. And then we'll touch our supervisors, our field supervisors, every 3 to 4 years always. And then there will be pockets of this that we will be able to put into our 6-7 minute e-learning components that we can touch people even more frequently. So that's our big picture. It's a verbal report because I haven't responded yet in any type of formal report, but certainly I can give a response when if they come back in 90 days, the IG's office, I can give a department response for you.
Thank you. And then my last question just is about the special order and your sense about the timing for that. Whether that's tracking with that, or would that be a different?
Oh, I think we can track with it. Scott and his folks have been working really closely on identifying those issues. And again, this is the nice thing about the report. It puts it all in one place for all of us. But Scott and Django have been working on looking at these conflicts and how do we get these conflicts out. So that's actually started already as well. So I do believe in 90 days you'll have be able to have a pretty solid update.
Great. Thank you very much.
And I just join with everyone commending the department and the IG's office. This was a major, major effort, highly professional, coming up with good solutions, and we'll be following it up and see where we are in, 90 days, do we think?
Yes, Madam President, what I would just like to do is summarize what you're expecting back in 90 days so there's clarity on that. From the department, the status of the special order revision, the status of the form, and the training rollout. From the Inspector General, responding to Commissioner Bernardino's questions and analysis of the number of level 1s and level 2s that have resulted in lawsuits, and any follow-up as to any dollars from those, to do a cost-benefit analysis, and in 90 days for both of those reports.
Well, also, I'd like just, here's the recommendations that they made, and here's the status of those recommendations in terms of, they may be completed, they may not be completed, but at least
status
report on each of the recommendations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. I think then we're clear what we'll look for in 90 days.
Yes, again, excellent. Thank you.
I would move approval of item 8A.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Approved. We turn to B, which is the department's report on the analysis of traffic collisions over the last 5 years. Welcome, Deputy Chief Downing.
Yes, good morning, Madam President and fellow commissioners, Chief.
Good morning.
This report was submitted to the Police Commission as a result, as you know, of a City Council motion to report on the efforts to reduce hit-and-run traffic collisions. The report also contains an analysis of traffic collisions over the last 5 years. I'd like to thank Captain Phil Fontanetta for his leadership at Emergency Operations Division, and specifically Mike Gregg. Although this was a collaboration with many people, Mike Gregg, to my left, really walked the point on this throughout the process. The LA Weekly article, which prompted much of the concern, cited that in the city of Los Angeles, 48% of crashes were hit and runs in 2009, but in the United States, 11% of the collisions were hit and runs. So in order to bring this to context and comparison to this analysis, 5 large metropolitan cities were compared to the city's collision statistics from 2008 to 2012. New York, Chicago, Houston, San Francisco, and Seattle. And the adjustments that were made for the differences in reporting criteria, reporting jurisdiction, and traffic volume really bring context to what we were talking about. For example, and I will say that although 20,000 hit and runs a year is unacceptable, and that needs to be reduced, and efforts will continually be made to do that through accountability, through education, engineering, enforcement, etc. But a couple points. The 3 criteria that really changed the statistics were the reporting criteria. For example, in Los Angeles, we don't take reports for property damage only, and that was a big statistic. In fact, we believe that by extrapolating statistics from the CHP and looking at what Houston did, as it indicates in the report, that's probably a 50% number. So it is quite significant. Adjustment for reporting of the jurisdiction. Los Angeles doesn't take reports involving freeways. The CHP does, so we added that to the mix as well. And then, of course, adjusting for traffic volume, the vehicle miles traveled. For example, if 5,000 vehicles went 1 mile, the vehicle's mile travel would be 5,000 miles. And there's a big difference. I mean, I think the report indicates that in New York, they have 47 million vehicle miles traveled a year. In Los Angeles, we have 74 million. So it is quite a difference. We're more of a vehicle city. The hit and run rate, and we broke this down. There's many different statistics here to try to bring context to it, but hit and run rate is a percentage of injury collisions, which is something that we could really grasp. It showed Los Angeles was 16%. And that was relatively comparable to the other cities that we looked at. New York was 9%, Chicago was 20%, Houston was 13%, San Francisco was 11%, and Seattle was 14%. The hit and run rate per million vehicle miles traveled, as you can see, we were relatively low. New York, Chicago, and Houston had higher rates than Los Angeles, and San Francisco and Seattle had slightly lower rates. Our rate was 0.152 vehicle miles traveled. The rate of injury of hit and run collisions. The citywide hit and run percentage for all injury and fatal traffic collisions combined decreased from 19% in 2008 to 15% in 2012. The percentage of hit and runs for fatal collisions only was a steady 20% over the 5-year period, with the exception of 2012, in which fatal hit and runs decreased to 14% of all fatal collisions. And then, of course, we have the bicycles and pedestrians. An average of 21% of severe or fatal bicycle collisions and 24% or severe or fatal pedestrian collisions resulted in a hit and run. Most significant was that the majority of the fatal and severe hit and runs involve pedestrians. And we have a chart that depicts that as well here. The differences between non-hit and run in terms of the primary causal factors and hit and run as the causal factors are fairly similar. For the hit and runs, it was in priority unsafe speed, unsafe backing or starting, unsafe lane change, DUI, and unsafe left turn. It was noted in the report that the City Attorney's Office nor traffic investigators maintain statistics on license status or intoxication levels of identified hit and run drivers. And then we do have recommendations on what we are doing in the areas of enforcement, education, and engineering to impact this. And I think it was noted as well that there are more injuries related to hit and runs than there are DUI related to DUI, yet the fines and penalties for DUI are much stiffer. And I think we're recommending an extension of the statute of limitations in terms of when you find the suspect involved in the hit and run, and putting more meat and teeth in the penalties for hit and run drivers. But in terms of the statistics, we are fairly comparable to the other major metropolitan cities. But like I said before, the 20,000 is unacceptable and needs to be reduced significantly.
I really appreciate it. I know Councilman Buscano asked for this, and I think others of us here on the Commission also did see that LA Weekly article and was concerned. Yes.
Thank you, Madam President. Chief, I had a couple of questions.
Yeah.
And some thoughts to share. I saw that bicycle fatalities and severe injuries concerning bicycles, that's the one part here where it's increasing, actually. I've lived in the city almost all my life, and I've noticed in the past few years we have a lot more people riding bicycles. In fact, the other night I was out and the street was just full of bicycles, and it was late at night, and I know they have these rides. Is there any indication there's a correlation between the increased bicycle accidents and just the increased bike lanes or the increased bicycle activities?
No, I think so. I mean, it's anecdotal. We don't have data to show the statistics of increased bicycle riders, but you can see it. I mean, it's really nothing you have to study. You can see it. The bike lanes have been put in. They are effective. However, there's still a need to educate the drivers. For example, drivers are making right turns through the bicycle lanes, and they're clipping bicyclists as they're coming through. So I think the bicycle lanes are a great idea in terms of protecting the bicycles, but on the other side, the strategy needs to focus on educating the drivers that these bike lanes give bicycle riders a right-of-way, and they need to be respected.
Excuse me if I may just... Please. You're right. There needs to be education, the drivers on the one hand, but frankly, there needs to be some education for bicyclists. Just a few days ago, I was driving along a street here. There was a bicycle lane, but the bicyclist was in the main lane for cars. They were just driving along.
I agree. I agree with you, Commissioner.
My point is it works both ways. But
no question
about it. I mean, I think probably people in cars may need to be sensitized a little more because they probably figure they have an advantage.
Yeah. But there are a lot more bicycles on the roadway today than there were 2 years ago.
Yeah, and I'm sorry.
No, thank you, Commissioner Mack. That was one of the points I was trying to get across. It's both ways, and it just seems we have a lot more, and also it seems we have a lot in the bicycles that are riding. It's not alone, it's large groups. It's a bigger pile. But the next issue is sort of anecdotal, and perhaps a question I have. It seems that whenever I get reports about bicycle accidents, they happen in the city or happen on the west side. And it seems when I get reports on pedestrians being killed or injured, it's in the valley. And I live in the valley, as you know. And anecdotally, I can tell you, it seems that happens all the time there. And I'm wondering, the valley streets are different than city streets. Valley streets are broader, longer. People get up to a higher speed. And in the city, the blocks are smaller, more lights, more congestion. I mean, you can't drive the same speed in the cities you can in the valley. Your report does a good job of dispelling the rumor or the myth that Los Angeles was the hit-and-run capital of the world. But it doesn't break down in terms of the bureaus. And I think that would be helpful in the future if you looked at it and see if this my anecdotal memory or other people's memories is correct. And because I think the solution to pedestrian hit-and-runs is different than the solution to bicycle hits. What are your thoughts, Commander?
Could I ask Captain Fontenette on the profiles, which we added the hit-and-runs and the pedestrian bicycle accidents on the CompStat profiles. Do we have those broken down by bureau, or is it just citywide?
They're broken down by bureau.
Yeah. So we do on the CompStat profiles, we have those broken down. And we could certainly...
No, I don't need to see them as long as... it wasn't in the report, so that's why I was just raising
And what I was going to say about that is this issue is CompStatted now through command accountability, so there is focus on it, but there needs to be more focus on that as well.
Okay.
And as Mike and Phil well know, that the city is broken up into 4 geographic traffic divisions, and each one of them is responsible for the unique problems of that area. And Valley Traffic is extremely concerned with not only pedestrian enforcement and education, but bicycles.
Thank you,
and just things that we're doing, such as in the valley. You're right. There does seem to be more pedestrian, especially more senior pedestrian traffic accidents and fatalities. And so there are efforts to repaint crosswalks, even unmarked crosswalks, just to give it more visibility for the driver and the pedestrian.
Thank you, Chief.
That was along the lines on my question of things that we are doing since, of course, we all recognize that it's an unacceptable number. What plans do we have in terms of targeting enforcement? Can we have any increase in enforcement? Those kinds of questions.
Yeah, I think this is a great example of what we can do, and you can see the effectiveness of it. Just on May 31st, in one day, we did a pedestrian safety task force for those pedestrians that are walking off curbs to see what happens with the vehicle behavior. And in one day, 470 citations were written. 184 from West Bureau, 116 from Valley Bureau, 103 from Central Bureau, and 102 from South Bureau. So as you can see, it's a citywide problem. It's really not in any one one area, although there were more citations written in West Bureau than the other bureaus. So I think it's that type of enforcement. It's education on both sides. It's re-engineering, making sure that there's good visibility for crosswalks and unmarked crosswalks and lights, and holding people accountable to that.
Chief, where do we stand with your potential recommendation, or is this something that's going to be, once action is taken today, then the next step will be before public safety regarding the potential for proposing additional legislation to have penalties comparable, for the driver? You talked about the DUI penalty being more severe than the others. Where are we with that?
The Assembly bill is currently under review right now to extend the statute of limitations for at the time, it's currently 3 years, but at the time you find the individual who committed the crime, an additional year. And then there's other efforts to increase the penalties on hit-and-run drivers as well. We're even looking at vehicle forfeitures, taking away licenses, those types of things. It's in the process.
Those seem to be more important than the extending the statute of limitations. Maybe, it just seems to me, if you get out 3 years, the likelihood that you're going to catch somebody in that 4th year, well, maybe you will, but it seems to me that the focus in terms of legislation should be enhancing the penalty, no civil compromises. Those recommendations the department makes, I think, are really solid recommendations, and that's where we should be pursuing. The statute of limitations, sure, if you can get an extra year, okay, but I don't think that's going to have a significant impact, whereas I think if you get some increased penalties and we then get publicity about those increased penalties and forfeiture of licenses and stuff like that, then I think you might have some impact.
Yeah, those two areas, the license issue and also the vehicle registration issue. It does seem that a percentage of hit-and-run vehicles are unregistered vehicles. It's hard to follow up. It's hard to conduct an investigation if it's unregistered. So those task force on those types of areas in terms of vehicle registration, there should be more of those.
Now, do we already have City Council support for this, for the proposed legislative recommendations?
We do, yes.
Since we don't know how many of our property hit-and-runs there are, since we don't take reports, and I'm not suggesting that we change that policy given resources, but do we have any idea of...
Let me clarify that. We clarify that for the Commission.
Yes.
For hit-and-runs, we do. We report all hit-and-runs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hit-and-runs are a crime, so we take all hit-and-runs.
All right.
But it's the collisions involving property damage only that we don't.
I misspoke.
Yeah.
Yes. We don't have an idea.
It's your denominator that you
The denominator we don't have the number on. Do we have any idea of what the number is, and how do you extrapolate? How did you extrapolate it in this?
So we looked at the CHP within city limits on the property damage only accidents that they took. And 57% of the collision reports completed by the CHP within the city limits on the freeways, et cetera, were PDO. We looked at Houston.
Property damage only.
Yeah, we looked at Houston, and Houston's rate was 48. So if you extrapolate that and look in between, I'm guessing, but I would say 50%.
Okay, I use the 50% number very quickly, but I think that helps clarify how we get there. And at least for me, at the end of the day, it's not how close we are to the other cities or not how close we are. It's just what you already said. The 20,000 is too many.
It's too many.
And we've got to do things, and it sounds to me as if we are doing things. One of the things that is not in our jurisdiction, but apparently the fact that the city attorney does not take information on the captured hit-and-run driver as to either license or DUI. I think that's something that should be picked up by the city attorney.
We've talked about that. I think we can do that. It would require the investigators, when they do their cases, to create a database or somehow, but I think we can reflect that not only in the CompStat profiles, but we can also require that in the investigative follow-up units of the traffic divisions, and we'll push on that as well.
I just have one question about the CompStat piece. If I understand it right, the hit and runs statistics are now part of what is looked at in CompStat.
Yes.
And has that been happening for a long time, or is that relatively new?
Well, May of this year, we added that to the CompStat profile with 2 additional pages for the traffic profile.
So it's probably too early then to get a sense.
Too early to measure,
right.
But it'll definitely, the traffic division captains will feel the pressure of this during the CompStat process.
And I guess one other fairly broad question. Could you talk a little bit about the overall process in the regular situation for taking a report on a traffic collision? And the reason I ask that is really to ask whether, because of this issue, the attention on the hit and runs, you've had to look at the overall process a little bit, and I'm curious whether your review of that and your description of it raises any issues about whether that process itself is as good as it ought to be currently, given the resource issues. Is it a relatively old process that, given changes in technology, we might make some changes in?
Well, the process is fairly old. I mean, the criteria is fairly old, probably more than 25 years, I would estimate. But it's in our traffic manual, and basically it requires a traffic collision report when any of the following occur: a fatal injury, an injury, a traffic felony, a city property involved, or a possibility of city liability, driving under the influence, all hit and runs, and rail conveyances or trains. Those are the areas that we take them. We don't take them on just
property. And then the process of taking the report, how does that happen?
It could happen, somebody could come into the front desk and we can conduct a report and a preliminary investigation then. It could be a traffic call out on the street. Black and whites would handle it. Traffic divisions would handle it. The exception would be a motor officer would handle it. But yeah, it's a report.
From the citizens' perspective, is there an alternative using technology to coming into the police station to file the report, or is that just not realistic? Or
no, I don't believe so. I mean, you're talking like maybe like an app sometime on a phone or something?
Yeah, I guess I had the sense from reading this, and you've confirmed it, that the criteria are old, and I'm not suggesting they're bad. I don't have any idea. But it does strike me that perhaps the reporting process might, given changes in technology, there might be some ways to make that easier. I guess I'm asking you to think about that.
We'll definitely think about it. Yeah.
One of the issues with that is in almost all cases there's evidence that has to be examined by a trained investigator. Right. This is generally a person's own account of what occurred to their car is their own account of what occurred to their car. So if they come into the police station...
Well,
if they come into the police station, for a hit and run, this is what happens. Many times you go out, your car's got a dent in it, the mirror's broken off, and so you could either call, and that's not a high priority call, so that may take a while. You can go to a police station desk. Desk officer comes out, takes a look, writes your hit and run report, and off you go. We're struggling with what reports we can put online. We've got a project right now looking at several types of reports that I think are less likely to require the expertise of a police officer, so we'll be able to do that. One of the things that is coming online, though, is that the public will be able to retrieve these reports online, and that's significant. In the past, you had to go through a process. There was a charge, and it took longer than any of us would like to get your traffic accident report for your insurance purposes. But now we're rapidly approaching the point where the public can go online, get a copy of the report, and so I think that way is probably the way to address this with technology. We'll look at if there's anything in the traffic world that would make sense for self-reporting, but there is the caveat is that the expertise is very important on this. Along with some independents, because there's always money involved. So,
And so I'm sorry to, just one more question. So is there actual investigations that back up these kinds of reports, or how and when does that happen?
Yeah, depending on which category it is, if there's follow-up information, then certain, like a license plate or pay transfer or anything that would be forensicated in the investigation to follow up, then there's investigation. And as you know, there's of the 670 people involved in the traffic division, 66 are assigned as follow-up investigators. And so those are only 66 out of that 670 actually conduct investigations. So that's why we have to have categories in terms of is there a likelihood if we conduct an investigation we could solve this hit and run or whatever crime it is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam President, I move approval of the department's report.
Excuse me, Commissioner, we do have
there is a
4 comment cards.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
We have Jeff Jacobberger, Colin Bogart, Eric Bruins, and Don Rosenberg.
And it's late at night, too.
Good morning, Commissioners and Chief. My name is Jeff Jacobberger. I'm the chair of the City of Los Angeles Bicycle Advisory Committee. I'd like to thank LAPD for preparing this report. I think there's some really good data that hopefully will inform, LAPD's policies and procedures going forward. I think I'd just like to highlight, I think the report makes very clear that pedestrians and bicycles truly are vulnerable road users on the streets of Los Angeles. Has been noted, something like 75% of the seriously injured or killed victims of hit-and-run collisions are pedestrians or bicyclists. I don't know that I have any, specific recommendations. I do think, though, that, in general, as a bicyclist, I'm somewhat disappointed in that I think very aggressive driving that takes place around bicyclists and pedestrians is treated as, oh, that's just a car. When from the perspective of a bicyclist or pedestrian, somebody driving in a super aggressive and dangerous manner around you is not that different than somebody waving a gun at you. And we do not treat those the same at all, when in fact the possible consequences to that pedestrian bicyclist are in fact the same. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, Chief Beck, my name is Colin Bogart. I'm with the Los Angeles County Bicycle Coalition. Good morning. We've been anticipating this report for some time. As you may recall, I came to this commission shortly after the weekly report and asked for action. So we're very pleased that the report has been released, and we support the recommendations. I am the education director for the LA County Bicycle Coalition. So you just were discussing some education issues, and I want to point out that the LA County Bicycle Coalition is working with Metro to do bicycle safety classes this summer, and that we are also just recently released a Rules of the Road pocket guide for bicyclists. We're very interested in partnering with LAPD on producing more of these and extending our reach in distribution of this pocket guide. We think it's a really effective tool. We basically tell bicyclists, if you know the rules of the road, 50% of your crash risk has been reduced just by knowing and obeying those rules. I do also want to mention that I am the staff person at LACBC who goes to the bicycle liaison group meetings, and I maintain regular contact with the 4 bicycle liaisons from the different traffic divisions. It's been a productive collaboration. We've made a lot of progress over the past several years, and LACBC has been involved with that along with many others. We think this traffic collision report highlights the importance of those meetings, and that there's regular ongoing dialogue and progress reports, particularly in reference to the central group meeting that meets here in downtown. Right now we're only meeting twice a year, and we think that really needs to be brought back up to a more regular, more frequent basis. Twice a year is simply not enough. And we look forward to working with LAPD with this group, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Eric Bruins. I'm the Planning and Policy Director also at the LA County Bicycle Coalition. And so in going through the report, I want to commend the department on a really high-quality report and very thorough review of this issue. I think what was pointed out is that there's twice as many hit and runs as DUIs, and so that really speaks to the importance of this issue as a traffic crime, and that's really what it is. And it is a crime when you're the victim of this crime. I know for most pedestrians and bicyclists, this is literally the type of crime that we worry about the most in terms of daily quality of life in the city. And so it really speaks to the importance of increasing the transparency and of the data reporting, and all the progress on CompStat really will keep us in that direction. But having regular reporting the same way we do violent crime, you know, when we, at the beginning of the meeting, we listed off the property crime, the violent crime, the rapes, and all of that kind of stuff. Having this in there, because that's what this is violent crime. Your personal space is being violated in this. And the other technical piece on the report is I actually don't think vehicle miles traveled is an appropriate denominator, because we don't measure violent crime with a gun ownership as the denominator. In terms of prevalence of traffic collisions, VMT is appropriate, but in terms of the prevalence of crimes in a city, that really should be per capita, and so I would like to see that change reflected. And the last thing is we really look forward to working with LAPD to advance a lot of the state legislative changes. You know, we worked with Gatto's office on the AB 184, which deals with the statute of limitations. But it's exactly what you mentioned, is that's, you know, that probably of the 5 things that need to be done, that might be the least effective. And so we really need some group with the heft of like LAPD to go to Sacramento and work with us and say, you know, we really need more tools in our belt. So we look forward to working with the department. Thank you.
Thank you.
% of the time, compared to licensed drivers who flee 3.7% of the time. Assuming that the drivers of all 45,000 reported collisions were licensed, they would be responsible for 1,600 hit and runs, leaving 17,900 unaccounted for. Even if you were to assume that the number of licensed drivers fleeing was 500% more than the national average, that would still leave 11,000 hit and runs unaccounted for. Yet this report does not address those drivers who are driving on a revoked or suspended license or have no license at all. The report recommends removing unregistered cars from public roadways, but not unlicensed drivers. This report is terribly flawed and is just trying to confuse the issue with worthless statistics in comparison to other cities that have the same issue of a significant number of unlicensed drivers. I know that the Inspector General is extremely busy, but I would like to recommend that he review this report. I'm volunteering my time and expertise in this area to work with the Inspector General in producing a report worthy of the City Council requests. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is the final comment card, Madam President.
Thank you. And now a motion?
Sure. Madam President, I move approval of the department's report and transmission of the report to the Council's Safety Committee.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. C, Department's report relative to the Risk Manager's quarterly status report.
Good morning. Mr. Chaliff is not available today, so I'm acting for Mr. Chaliff, and Ms. Correa is out of pocket also, so I'm going to let her, Beth, introduce her title, because I don't remember the total title on it. Beth Alonzo.
Hi, I was just placed in charge of the risk management assessment section, so working for Beth Correa.
And she's, as you all know, she's got a tremendous history with our audit, both in the Inspector General's office and with the department. So we think this is really going to be able to enhance our department risk manager's ability to report going forward.
And welcome to one of the most challenging responsibilities.
Yes, and we're so happy to have her. Just a quick overview of the report. We have 42 specific strategies, and one of the reasons I'm sitting before you is I have a part in whole or in part in at least 22 of those strategies. But there are also some categories within some of the strategies. So there's actually 54 strategies that Ms. Alonso is tracking. 22 of those have been implemented. 10 have been completed. 12 are ongoing, which also include ongoing meetings and monitoring. 28 are in progress, and we do expect those to be completed by the end of the year and fully implemented by the end of the year, certainly January 1st. And 4 have not been initiated. And those 4 that have not been initiated, it's a matter of trying to get enough resources to Ms. Correa in terms of trying to get some of these going forward. As you know, another reason that I am here is I am here to report that we have started to identify and bring in people, because that was some of the biggest problems we had in the very beginning when we brought our risk manager in. We didn't have resources for her to go into the details that many of you had asked. So this report summarizes where we're at with all of the 54 category strategies that are going, and Ms. Alonso can really probably speak to some of those in more detail, but I can certainly speak to the ones that apply to me.
Chief MacArthur, when I read the report, thank you very much for letting us know what's already been implemented, what's in the pipeline, and it seems like most of it is or not. Because when I read the report, it seemed it was prospective. This is what's going to happen. But clearly stuff has been happening, and it's been happening for a while, which leads me to my question is, we don't have any numbers on if it's being successful. I know there's goals set, and I'll speak to that next, but we don't have any indication if, we're halfway through the year. Are we at a pace?
Are we hitting the target?
To hit the numbers. And so in the next quarterly report, I know it's not here, but in the next quarterly report, I think that should be added in. Secondly, in terms of hitting the mark, I don't know if as you know, I'm an attorney, and I don't know if number of lawsuits is the best criteria here. It is a criteria, and I think it's important to know if we have lots of lawsuits in that area. But I think even more important to know is what is the impact of those lawsuits? How much is it costing us? And I think that should be a baseline also in terms of this is how much we had to pay out, this is how much we've paid out this year, or how much it's cost us. Whatever goes into that number, I think that should be reflected here, because you could have a lot of lawsuits, or even if you hit your numbers and reduce, say,
the dollar amount being paid out.
It's reversed, rather. Hypothetically, say you reduce the number of employment lawsuits filed, but we see the employment damage number jumping. That, to me, would tell us that we're not being effective, that there's some other problem.
One of the pieces that the Department of Risk Manager and Beth and I were talking about this before, there are some of these, and that is one of them, that we only have one performance marker. So we are looking now to go to, after conversations that the Department of Risk Manager has had with some of you, to go and add markers, and that is one area that we are looking at. I know the Inspector General is looking at that as well. What happened when the Department of Risk Manager started to dive into that is we found out the city attorney nor the police department were really tracking how much time is spent. So we started first with our legal affairs division, and they're implementing a tracking system so we can hopefully start tracking some of those things, because all of those, as you say, will play into one of the markers. I think that's really important. We are going to be looking, even though we do know that there's a lot of different things that can come into play in terms of what's the payout. Sometimes an incident in the city can cause a jury to pay out a lot of money. It's still things we need to look at, and we need to really triage and see.
Sure. My comments are broad, and I have two more broad comments. We could discuss the specifics later, but I don't think this is appropriate for that. But the third comment I have is in regards to the participants here, because I see that the report lists this part of the department's involved, your department's involved, Chief Pacender's department involved. But what I don't see is a real listing of some of the other stakeholders that are involved, and particularly the group that's got to be involved in this, particularly the ADR, the alternate dispute resolution, the employment issues, particularly that. You have to have the union involved. and other stakeholders. Just by way of reference, this morning when we sat down, or I sat down, I received an email from a dispute between a couple of officers, and referenced in that were other, groups within our department. We have groups of officers, African American officers, Hispanic officers, particularly where we're talking about employment or discrimination issues. I think you need to get all the stakeholders at the table. And, Chief MacArthur, you and myself and Executive Director Tiefenk have been involved in the workers' comp issue. And I think the reason we've made some progress there is because we had the union at the table with us as equal partners. We had the city there. And I think to make these programs effective, you really need to have that. Now, I know the Inspector General has made some efforts, particularly with the ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution, with the union, and I think those efforts need to be enhanced and taken beyond what appears from this report. It's important for the department to be all on board, but it's not going to be successful unless all the stakeholders are on board with these changes and are committed to making these reductions. My final question, and I'll turn it over to the rest of my commissioners, my friends, is just procedural. There's discussion in this report about changes in policies, but there's no discussion about running those policy changes through us or through Inspector General. And I assume that's just an oversight because there's the reference is general, that there will be changes in policies or evaluated. I don't know, obviously I don't know what changes those are because they're not set forth here, but I assume that whatever, if there's a decision made that certain policies need to be changed, that the Inspector General will have a chance to comment, that we'll have a chance to review them?
That is a standard. We don't change policy without it coming through the commission, and we of course work with the Inspector General. So we didn't. I read this report and I didn't see that. I even realized that was an oversight, and I apologize for me missing it as well. But any policy change does come through the commission, and we work with the inspector. We'll be working with the Inspector General on it as well.
So, in conclusion, my hope is that at the next quarterly report, we have some numbers indicating either we are being successful or we are not being successful. And either way, it's important for us to know so then we can make adjustments and devote resources to it. And finally, I guess this will really be my last point. By breaking this down by loss, real money losses, I think we'll be able to target where the biggest losses are. And that seems obvious, but the report makes several references that things may be delayed because of budgetary issues or we may not have the resources to do it. So I think we need to look at where are the biggest losses coming from and attack those.
And focus on that.
Yes. And I think that that's lost if we just look at numbers of lawsuits as opposed to the impact of certain of those lawsuits. Okay?
Yep, understood.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief, I thought, let me say, I think this report is a significant improvement over prior reports. I mean, I like the format better. I think it provides a lot more information. My concern about the report is the lack of specificity in the report, both in terms of what has been accomplished, when there's systems that are going to be looked at, what are those systems, and then when you say in the future, this is what we are going to do, these are our goals, I just think there's a lack of specificity in here. For example, I couldn't, as I'm going through here, or maybe I could have figured it out, I couldn't tell what 54 recommendations or things that you're talking about are here. And so it might be useful to even have an appendices that would list each one and the status of each one of those, or within the report in each section. I just think you need more specificity as to, okay, here's what we've done specifically, here's what our goals are, here's what the status is of certain changes. I think Commissioner Bernardino's recommendation with respect to statistics, I think we're halfway through the year. So by the next report, we'll be 3/4 of the way through the year, but you should have the statistics for the first half of the year by then.
We do anticipate having that, so we agree with you.
And one thing I do note, the suggestion in here is for semi-annual reports. I don't think that's a good idea, at least right now. I remain of the view that there should be quarterly reports. And I mean, I think we are making progress in these reports. This, to me, is the most useful report that I've seen, and I appreciate the effort on that. And as I went through it, I thought, okay, here are the things that now I can really say I need. I need more specificity as to what has been accomplished and what is in the process of being accomplished and what are our future goals, and then some way to measure that. So those are my recommendations for Ms. Correa. I do compliment her. I think this is a big improvement, but I think that we can now start to really focus on the specificity, and that will help us understand what the department is doing. But I think it also helps the department. You look at this and say, okay, here's where we were 3 months ago. Where are we today? What progress have we made? Why haven't we made more progress? And it'll help the department in terms of measuring it as well.
And I think that it will be very helpful. That was, and part of the twice a year idea was not necessarily that we wouldn't come quarterly, but twice a year we could really see the impact of the numbers, hopefully. So one of the things that what you just hit on, which is really important, also for me, since so many of these touch me or I touch them, working with the Inspector General on identifying all of the 54, the 42 categories and then the subcategories and where they fall. So it's an easier reporting process. So it's a quicker read, and we can go right to strategy number 33 and identify that. And so I'm hoping that between now and the next report that the Department Risk Manager and Beth and even myself can get together with the Inspector General and maybe find a simpler reporting process for progress. And then quarterly we can highlight different pieces of it, and that's what I'm hoping. And so maybe we can work with, I think, you. Yes, you too, right? Yeah, on that process.
And that's fine. And I'm comfortable with the numbers coming out semi-annually, as long as at least quarterly, where we are focusing on those things that are being implemented or being suggested or recommended.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And on the numbers of judgments and high dollars going out and settlements, and we all recognize that they will be measuring something that happened as much as 4 or 5 years before, but it still will be extraordinarily helpful, especially if we're getting X number of claims in almost precisely the same area, the same way. So we recognize that there is a real lag of as much as 4 or 5 years in those numbers, and hopefully whatever the problem was there might have changed. But anyway, I just wanted you to know that.
And hopefully with the lessons learned the lessons learned systems that are becoming to be really put in place and more formally, we'll start attacking that as well. We'll start to see us making impact on what caused some of these lawsuits 5 years ago, and hopefully they're not the same things causing lawsuits today.
I share Commissioner Druyan's positive comments about the report. I think it's clearly an improvement over the reports we've seen in the past, and I appreciate that. I know it's been a long, hard effort. I do have a few specific questions. The first really follows up on Commissioner Bernardino's question about the policy changes coming to the Commission and related to that involvement of the Inspector General and in some cases the City Attorney. And there are two in particular I just wanted to make sure we're in agreement on. Page 4 of the report, development and implementation of risk management assessment section, completing the ongoing assessments of the risk areas and monitor implementation, in particular with respect to harassment, discrimination, retaliation in the workplace. So that's one. The second is on the next page, number 5, which has to do with Teams 2. Both of those seem to me things that would absolutely, we would want to see. I would like the assurance Inspector General, City Attorney as appropriate.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Page 6, number 9, is a reference to the quarterly bulletin. Language talks about what will be addressed in the first bulletin, and I'm just curious now, given where we are in this process, when we're likely to see that first bulletin?
I apologize, I don't know the answer to that. I
believe it's within the next month or two. It should be out.
Okay.
The original goal is to have it start in July. I cannot tell you that it's going to be done in July or August, but that was the goal, was for the fiscal year to start it, kick it off, and do it at that point. But I don't know the date.
I appreciate that. On page 9, at the top, number 1, identification. Again, just a question about timing. It's anticipated the strategy will identify areas the department can focus on. Do we have a sense of the timing on that?
These are actually in process right now. Looking at, I think, 5 years of lawsuits coming in, it'd probably be finished in a couple months.
Okay. And continue on that page, the bottom paragraph regarding the intake process for the workplace personnel complaints and concerns. You list out the Professional Standards Bureau, ERG, WLS, chain of command. Just was a little surprised not to see the Inspector General there. Is that just...
That's just an oversight.
The Inspector General will be involved?
Yes, the Inspector General will be, then that was just an oversight in the report.
Great, thank you. A couple things about the traffic collisions. So page 10 and page 11. First, I just want to compliment Chief Paisinger and others, Chief Paisinger in particular, for the proactive approach being taken on the traffic collisions. We've clearly seen a significant change in that approach, and looking forward to seeing whether that's having some effect. The next page I was going to ask about, but I think you've answered, about whether we've got any year-to-date comparisons yet on the preventable traffic collisions. The graphs are going up to 212, but I guess we'll see that in the next quarterly report. Okay. Page 12, under number 1, the second bullet, in implementing investigative strategies for the new multidisciplinary collision investigative team and its investigation of serious employee-involved traffic collisions. I may have misunderstood that. I understood that to already be happening, that team was already functioning. But the way I read this, it sounds like it hasn't started yet. So I'm just curious if you can help me understand that.
You want to go ahead?
I believe this is more along the lines of Beth's strategy to implement the human factor assessment classification system, and attempting to look at all the 5 different areas and identifying the root cause. Obviously, that's being done by the department, but a tracking system that actually addresses the primary reason, coming up with coding for the primary reason, assessing contributing factors that might have also been involved, like a physical limitation or some type of adverse mental state involved in that. So looking at contributing reasons, and then coming up with potential solutions on each one of these things, a potential the thing that could help prevent the issue in the future. And although we're doing that, we need some type of information gathering so we have it at real time, so we can look at maybe a year's worth of data and see those codings and say, okay, look at this is what's coming up. So that's kind of around what that strategy is.
So the team's actually functioning, but this is some added...
There's a few things that are, yes, this is actually trying to really drill down into the causes and the contributing factors. The teams are in place and they are rolling out. We have been able to, I think the last report we were struggling with getting some of the resources. We got the resources there. The 72-hour briefs the chief now holds on any significant case, and they get a very thorough brief, and the Inspector General is there for those as well. The other thing that is implemented is the training component. So we have implemented the core pieces of the new process. However, really getting into the finite detail and making sure that we're asking all of the correct standardized questions for every case is still in progress.
Thank you. And page 14 at the top, the bullet, evaluating compliance with the traffic collision point-based system. I'm just curious about I know we've heard about that for some time, what the status of that evaluation is.
I recently checked with IID, and I believe their report is in draft form. It should be issued relatively soon. And they were doing an assessment on the accuracy of the point system and how it's applied.
Beth Rick can comment on that.
Yeah, Commissioner, I think you're asking about the overall, coming back to the Commission for the overall preventable traffic collision. ERG was in the process of meeting with the League. That meeting then meant a redraft of the order. That order is now going back to ERG to meet with the League, and that's the current status.
Thank you. I'm almost done, only a couple more, and which is partly a reflection of what's in the report. So I appreciate that. On page 18, number 2, policies and procedures, there's reference to pilot program establishing a minimum of 3 mandatory sessions with BSS personnel following an employee's referral in the above identified incidents. And again, I'd like to understand a little better how that's different. I understood that the BSS referral was already happening, and I'd like to understand better what the change
means.
would be.
Actually, I think this is a relatively significant change.
Okay.
We've had an agreement in process since the very early stages of the consent decree, implementation of a lot of the consent decree mandates. And at the time, there was a one-time referral. So if I get involved in a categorical use of force, I go to behavioral sciences in most cases, prior to the 72-hour brief for the chief. And I would not go back to the field until I went through that process. Through a lot of different avenues, and as you talk about, stakeholders are so important, through officers coming to me themselves, coming to the union, and the union and I speaking about this, and then in consultation with behavioral sciences, we felt that we were doing a disservice to our officers, that actually going more than one time to behavioral science, even if they're cleared to go back to the street, things over time start to surface for individuals. And it was actually, the idea came from officers themselves who had themselves been involved in use of forces. So we think that is a better way to manage stress, to manage the aftermath, and especially because, as all of you know, when it comes back to commission 6 months later, everything surfaces again. So we felt it was really important to have the safety net of letting our officers go and manage their stress effectively by requiring more than just the one time. So we really looked at it, assessed it with behavioral sciences, the director, chief psychologist Kevin Jablonski, and working with our union on it, the officers union on it, and we now require 3 times.
Thank you. Just 2 more questions. On that same page, 18, the next bullet regarding reviewing the use of force policies and procedures. Again, I'm assuming that is going to involve use of force division, FID, Inspector General, training division.
Absolutely, and this is specifically actually coincides with exactly what the Inspector General identified in their report. So it's really nice. It's almost like there's a...
That's on the non-CAT side, but this
is the total piece.
Okay.
And actually, when you talk about the Inspector General's report, when they looked at the policies, it's the overall use of force policies that we need to make sure that they don't have conflict. So this will double tap. It'll work for the report here. It'll go through the Police Commission. It'll go through the Inspector General. And, of course, Use of Force Review will be very involved in it, as will FID.
Great. My last question, it's on the next page under for accountability, but it's related to what we're just talking about, which is where the use of force recommendations, where the issues regarding these risk management issues might end up appearing in the use of force reviews and in the recommendations. And I guess I would ask you to think about whether, if you're not already, including as a standard section in the evaluation of the categorical use of force reports that we see, some discussion of this risk management issue, and then essentially making sure that issue is discussed each time so that it's raised for the chief, it's raised for us, so that we can be following up where it's appropriate to do that.
Okay, please.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Is there a motion?
Sure. Madam President, I move approval of the department's report.
Second? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you for jumping in.
For filling in.
Appreciate it. All right, public comment?
No.
No, we have F, the department's report on... We appreciate your waiting for a very long agenda today.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Almost good afternoon.
Well, morning, Commander Sherman.
I'm Detective Dave Kennedy with Internal Audits Inspections Division. This particular audit is the last of the 4 bureaus that were tested, this being Central Bureau. As you can see, Central Bureau did some better than average performance within this audit. Although the audit does indicate some areas where improvement can be made. And as always, we continue to work with the bureaus and the areas to achieve better results. The project manager on my left, far left, Daryl Martin, can be questioned if you have any specific questions about the audit. Otherwise, you can give it to the Bureau for their plan of action to address the findings.
I think we can move directly to the plan of action. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners, Chief. Commander John Sherman, Operations Central Bureau. And just to go over some of the things we've done and will continue to do, Chief Perez and I have both reviewed this, and as Detective Kennedy said, we're generally pleased with the way we placed within compared to some of the other bureaus. We did see some areas that we continue to need to give some attention to. Some of the things we've done already is we've shared this report with all the commanding officers at one of our staff meetings, and the Bureau Gang Coordinator met with all the GIT OICs, the Gang Impact Team OICs, on April 11th and went over the entire audit and some of the specific findings with them. We did notice that within one command, we did have a few more or higher percentage of anomalies within that command. And there was a change that was made within the GIT OIC position, the lieutenant position in that command. And we've done a couple audits within that command since that time. Specifically, one of the areas was the reviewing of the DFARs, and we've been auditing that. We audited that about 3 weeks ago and found 100% compliance in that area. So that change made some improvements. The area of the SBAs, we have, similar to our vice oversight, we've had the Bureau Gang Coordinator change some of their tracking mechanisms for the SBAs. We had been going off of action items, and now the Bureau Gang Coordinator is going off an anniversary date and monitoring that. Relative to objective number 1, the narrative portion of the arrest reports where there were a few anomalies, we've, besides giving the training to the GIT OICs, Chief Perez and I have implemented over the last about 9 months training with all the senior leadership team at the areas. And yesterday we had all the lieutenants within Operations Central Bureau at a leadership training session with the chief and I. And that was our third in a series of meetings with all the lieutenants in the Bureau, and we've done it with all the Sergeant 2s also. And at that meeting yesterday, the Bureau Gang Coordinator specifically went over some of the anomalies that we identified in the narratives of the arrest report, some of the omissions and some of the things that were left out, and we gave a few examples and passed them out to the leadership team of the areas. So those are a number of the things we've done already. We will continue to, with our Bureau inspection schedule, we are continuing to look at these areas that were identified in this audit. We'll continue to monitor them throughout the year.
It's particularly good. I think I heard it from one of the commissioners to my left about the being able to truly target an issue and a potential problem and solve it. And so it is what the audit is supposed to do, and it's good to hear that.
I mean, this is generally is a good audit when you look in comparison, but Commander Sherman, I mean, it seems to me that you and the Central Bureau and Chief Perez are being very responsive and really addressing these issues, and I think I really appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
I agree.
Is there a motion?
Move approval of regular agenda item 8F.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now it's time for public comment.
Yes, Madam President, we have one card. We have Ms. Wanda Solomon.
Good morning, board members. Ms. Officer Gibral, do you have the files for each one? Oh, you did. Thank you. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Wanda Solomon. I'm representing myself and also Single Parents of America. Just briefly, I just wanted you to review the well-written type report that I put together for you. And I just want to say that I'm very pleased to be in your presence to hear all of the reports that were made this morning. I'm hoping that I can work with the Inspector General. However, I want to ensure to you that the real world is out there. And the real world out there is very chaotic. It's very busy. There are a lot of people that have mental challenges. And I want to let you know that I am a victim of a crime. And I'm trying to live through that. As a matter of fact, I'm a victim of many crimes over the years that I've lived in the city of Los Angeles. So I'm pressing through some very difficult issues as I speak. I do want to say I have a wonderful investigator looking into this, but I have some recommendations that I wrote out. I take very good notes that I'd like to make a copy to share with you about the altercation I had on the bus. My point being is, what is the difference in the time that when 911 is called, the response, and I guess I can address that to the Inspector General, in between a black and white and, so to speak, a sheriff's car? And also, how does the LAPD and sheriff work together? I was injured by an altercation on the bus just last week, so I'm going to be going forth to the Metro board meeting with my recommendations as well. But I wanted to let you know the importance of public safety at these bus stops. I'm working with Jan Perry's office, the mayor's office, and implementing a petition.
Well, thank you
thank you for
much.
your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
And that is the final card, Madam President.
Thank you, and then we will recess for closed session.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss item numbers 10A1 and 10A2 in accordance with Government Code 54957.
I actually think she is listening to us, Jerry.
Item number 10A1 was discussed and the Chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. In closed session, item number 10A2 was discussed and the Chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. Madam President, is there a motion for adjournment?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned.
LA City View Channel 35. Your city, your channel.
Japan is in a recession, and the European Union wins the Nobel Peace Prize. Hello, everyone. I'm Bob Jimenez, and welcome to LA Business Today.
I'm Sharon Jimenez. Japan is an important trading partner to the U.S., with Tokyo and Los Angeles predicted to be 2 of 3 cities with trillion-dollar economies by 2020.
In case you're wondering, the European Union has won the Nobel Peace Prize for 6 decades of advancing peace in Europe.
All while the European countries continue to experience historic economic challenges. And Bank of England Governor Mervyn King is warning of impending currency wars between nations trying to speed economic growth.
You know, here in L.A., trying to start a new business in a changing neighborhood is like conducting a war. Derek Pipkin, owner of Pip's Restaurant on La Brea in the Mid-City, has successfully struggled to create a unique place to enjoy jazz and Italian food. His story is an inspiring one, and you're going to hear it on LA Business Today.
And it's certainly a war for TV producers who want to make a television series in Los Angeles. Producer Gary Markowitz is here with us on the show today to share his views about how to make a living in Hollywood, where the odds of filming are slim.
So let's get down to business.
LA-based TV producer Gary Markowitz knows firsthand how runaway production has forced jobs out of LA. Spending nearly a year in Toronto producing his TV series Fast Track, Markowitz says we need an Occupy Hollywood movement to bring jobs back to LA. Gary Markowitz, welcome to LA Business Today.
Thank you, Sharon.
You're from a very distinguished entertainment family. Tell us a little bit about your stepfather, who was a very famous producer-writer.
Well, first I better mention my mother, because...
Oh, yes, don't forget your mom.
My mom was also a stage actress and a singer, and I grew up in a show business family. In fact, she's 89 years old and performed at the Pantages